I'm excited about tonight. And I have to admit, I bought the book, started reading it, and then put the book down. I have no idea where it is. And Estelle and I have talked about it, and she's look in a bag. I've looked in every bag, and it was a great idea, but I found lots of things, but not the book. But anyway, I do want to say thank you, Jonathan, again for hosting us. And I understand that the Pat Conroy Center is going to be moving shortly. And do you want to add to that? Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. We're in our last week at our current location, 905 Port Republic, about to relocate to 601 Bladen Street, a few blocks from where we are now. And we will be doing some virtual programs during the transition, and then we'll reopen to the public on March 11th, which is a Thursday. And you all will get to see some new stuff and some materials that we've had before in a brand new way. The new location has a beautiful classroom and meeting room space. So once we can resume meeting in person, we will have a very cool space in which we can do that. In the meantime, it will serve as our studio, if you will, for all our ongoing virtual events. But we're very excited about the move.
Oh, I'm excited about it. I can't wait till we can get in there and use the room. But then at the same time, we can also do a Zoom for anyone who can't attend a Pulpwood Queen meeting. Would that be okay, Jonathan?
Yes, I think we'll be doing quite a few hybrid events for a long time to come. Now that we have a virtual audience all over the country, we never want to lose touch with those folks. So the room will be set up with that.
Great.
Both in-person and virtual audiences.
Good. Okay. Thank you for the update. Next month, Judith Little will be here to discuss the Chanel sisters. And she's told me that she really is looking forward to meeting with all of us. And tonight we have Estelle Ford-Williamson to talk about her book, Rising Fawn, which takes place, I believe, Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I've had the opportunity to hear her and have a discussion with her about her book. And Estelle, I am happy to have you here tonight, as well as the other Pulpwood Queens.
Thank you.
You're on.
I am just so pleased. You have no idea how much it means to me. I've heard so much about Pulpwood Queens. I'm now an author member, and I just look at Kathy Murphy's page and I just weep for all she does. I mean, she does so much. She's such a light. And to have so many chapters of people reading most of the same books, that's just amazing. It's the largest book club in the world, I guess. But, you know, they're all following this Pied Piper who just does nothing but read. She just reads all the time. And I heard about her through the Pat Conroy Center, because when the Conroy Center started up, they said that so-and-so was selected and that they were a Pulpwood Queen selection. And I thought, what's that? And I kept looking and I've just learned a whole lot about it. So congratulations on being part of such a huge organization, and one that supports Pat Conroy Center every year. Every time they do the Girlfriends Weekend, they raise money and it goes to the Pat Conroy Center. How nice is that? And you're so, you know, they're in East Texas. They're based in East Texas, although they're all over the world. So I'm just super impressed. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome.
Yes.
So what would you like to discuss about your book? Do you want to just
a lot of people want to know, why did you write this book? You know, why this particular book? My first novel is a novel of early Atlanta in North Georgia. It was a historical fiction. The name of it is Abbeville Farewell. And it's called Abbeville because it starts in Abbeville, South Carolina, in that area. It was called a district at that time. It's not the town of Abbeville, but it's close to it. That's my first writing a novel took place around that old adage of write what you know. Well, I didn't know everything I was putting in this book, but I had access and I had an interest in it. And like Dana writes about things having to do with FBI sleuthing and, you know, action. You tend to write what you know. but I had grown up in the South in Chattanooga area. I thought everybody had cannons on their front yard. Okay, a lot of my friends did, and a typical day was on a weekend was for my family and I to go out to Chickamauga Battlefield Park, and we could just run like crazy. There were 10 children in our family, so my parents were glad for any inexpensive outing, and they just liked nature as well. So I grew up, walking up what's called the Walker Monument. It's a huge medieval tower in the middle of the battlefield, and learning a whole lot about it. Anyway, those were the kinds of the experiences we had. I also went to Lookout Mountain a lot, and that's where Rising Fawn is. It's an actual place. It's a valley town, old town, below Trenton, Georgia. If anybody knows that area, it's to the west or the Alabama side of Lookout Mountain. Lookout is a huge mountain that spans Alabama, Georgia, and then shoots into Tennessee at the very end. It's diagonal across the northwest part of Georgia. One of the things we would do is we would go to a clothesline art show called Plum Nellie. And it was called that because it was Plum out of Tennessee and Nellie out of Georgia. It was up on what they call the backside of Lookout Mountain. That meant the backside meant the Alabama side, meaning remote, away from everything. And it's a very remote place. But there was a ledge there 2,000 feet up above the valley floor called Johnson's Crook. And that's where Fanny Menon, a well-known lino cut artist, lived in a cabin straight out of Snuffy Smith. There's the ledge, and then, everything falls below. Since I was having these kinds of experiences growing up, I started drawing on that when I began to write the second novel. The first novel, Abbeville Farewell, traces a family coming from Abbeville district to what became Atlanta. It was then the wild forest of DeKalb County. DeKalb County at that time took in everything from the present DeKalb County around Decatur and north and south of that, all the way to the Chattahoochee River. And what Fulton County and Atlanta were carved out of that eventually. And it carries this family. They're gunsmiths by trade. They are kind of caught in the middle of the Civil War, what becomes the big divide on slavery. And that book was to answer the question, what were those people thinking? Everybody knows slavery is wrong. Why did they think it was right? And how did that carry out in their lives? Once I'd finished that book, and it was well received, it was nominated for the Townsend Fiction Prize. I'd taken a lot of writing courses with really good fiction writers and had learned more of that art. And after I was done with that, it's like 10 years time, I'm thinking, I want the next book to have more appeal to a broader group. So I said, I want a story around a contemporary person, someone who's younger than me. It's easy. There are a lot of people who are younger than me. Experiencing the kinds of things that couples experience, that experience of 5 years in and you're wondering if you made a huge mistake, or he's not the person I married. And we just have such different interests. And coincidentally, I had been the victim of a credit card identity theft. I called one night to check my balance. And you know how you're always asked what your zip code is? It started going, bah, bah. You're not worried, call tomorrow or call. I had to call the next day. And they said, well, you're in Tustin, California. I said, I'm not, I'm in Atlanta. And that started a whole mystery of what had happened. There were, somebody else had my credit card identification. They were in California making cash advances. The entire 3 weeks I was in Peru. That whole time, they were in California having a high old time on my card. And some of the things that are in the book that you read about in the book in terms of how the detectives treated her and all, that's really how it was. It wasn't a lot of action. It was just, oh yeah, somebody got your identification. So that's why I wrote the book. I wanted people to have that same feeling that the earth had just kind of fallen out from under you, only in This lady's case, she's also got she's got a separation on her hands because her husband gets mad, as you read in the book, because there's another major fraud going on. $200,000 in a home equity loan that somebody took out in their name on their house. They went to a closing, and they walked out with cash, and then Claire and Willie are left. So my goal in writing the book was to help us see how much we are tied up in our own identity of belongings, relationship, our very home, and what happens to people when all that falls apart.
Yeah.
Any questions about that, or thoughts, or did you read that far? Anybody?
I have a question for you. I was curious about, and you said Rising Fawn is a real place.
It is.
And I was just curious, did you think about the name of that place and kind of use that name to sort of develop your character of Claire? Because it seems like she learned a lot and maybe rose above her problems or what was holding her back, or did that not, or was that kind of a coincidence?
Yeah, what was the order? It all started with a friend of mine, and Rising Fawn is a place, I'd always been fascinated with it. I mean, it's just really out on the edge of the mountain, and you just drop onto the earth. And it's had a number of artists over the years. And I visited Charles Counts, who was a major potter who taught most of the Southeastern potters in the 70s and 80s. He was quite good. And he was on that same ledge. He was in that same area. So the town name, the area name has always appealed to me. I wanted to set something there. Claire's personality comes from a friend I had who was Italian, grew up in Pittsburgh in a 3-generation Italian family. Her mother was not Italian, though. She was Irish. And there was a lot of screaming in that household, a lot of anger. It was the father's mother who was the Italian grandmother, and then her father was Italian, her mother was Irish, or Scots-Irish, and she was a child of that. And all the time I knew my friend, she was very timid. It was like she had been traumatized by this experience growing up. So her Italian nature was not recognized. She didn't talk about it a lot. Dark hair, dark eyes, but she didn't talk about things Italian. But she was such an artist with plants. She could garden like crazy. And when she would describe food, you'd think that she was some kind of an amazing chef. She had this sense of smells and how things went together and all. And sculpture. She always wanted one of those sculptures that I mentioned in the book, The Kiss by Rodin. So there were all these ways that her Italian nature was coming out, but she was completely in denial. And I thought that would be interesting to portray in a character, because a lot of us don't portray who we really are. I had another friend who was a well placed executive, and it wasn't until we worked together in various ways, not every day, but in professional capacities, I found out that she'd come from a very ragged background, West Virginia coal miners, happened to be Italian. I had no clue of any of that the 20 years I'd known her. But when we, in the workplace, sometimes we're, at least in the corporate workplace, let's put it that way, it can be a facade. And unless you see them on Zoom and they don't have their pants on, then you get to know people a little better. But in a way, Zoom is letting people into our homes and showing a lot more than we would see in the workplace. But that was my experience of in being in the work world, is that people respected certain boundaries, and certainly you didn't show a lot of things like an immigrant background or a discrimination or a family background like Claire's, that turns out to be just kind of crazy. Very tawdry. She has a tawdry background in terms of roots, raggedy roots, I call it.
For sure.
But also, so that rising fawn, the image goes with Claire just
Mhm.
nicely. But there is
Yeah.
that town, and it you probably read in the book, it comes from, Tony explains to her that the town gets its name because the Indian way is to, when a child is born, the father goes out and the first thing he sees, that becomes the name of the child. And I
Oh,
think
that's
that's
right.
fairly
Yeah.
common. I think that's fairly common in
Mhm.
Indians. And in Georgia, you know, even things that were called other things, once the Indians were removed, they got those names back. Hightower was became Etowah again. Chattanooga has never been called anything but Chattanooga, although it was called Ross's Landing after John Ross, who was a mixed breed Cherokee and Irish, Scots-Irish Indian chief. Most of the time, the Indian names are preserved, even if the people have been kicked out.
Yeah.
That's kind of, you might guess, I like the paradox of a beautiful place,
Mhm.
like these mountains and this waterfall that she's at. That's a direct contrast to the ugly things that have taken place, you know, the
Yeah.
horrible tragedies. The double murder I mentioned is still unsolved.
Hmm.
It actually did happen.
That really did happen.
The area was, a lot of people know it now because thanks to a very generous man, he bought all of Lula Lake so that it could be preserved. And his family said he almost tried to take it with him. On Super Bowl Sunday some years ago, they finally convinced him to sign it over to the Nature Conservancy, and it then became part of the Lula Lake Land Trust. And you can go there twice a month. It's open on the weekend, where you can go in and walk the same trails.
That's interesting.
Wow.
But yeah, the ugliness of that was another theme I want to deal with. I like literary fiction. I'm one of these people that like stories that they're plotted, and I did plot this, but it's not, the action and the plotting is not the whole thing. I want something to happen with the characters. I once asked Glenna Williams why she wrote the way she wrote. She was a very good short story writer on the faculty at Emory University. And she said, I don't know, I think I got hit on the head with the Harpers or something. You know, I just wanted to write literary fiction. And that's what I'm attempting. You know, to have characters. I want the characters to live with you, or, you know, you to invite the characters into your thoughts.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Anne.
Yes, thank you. I really did enjoy your book, and I liked the way you didn't really tie everything up with her. I'm glad she didn't decide for sure to go, you know, they still had things to work out.
Yeah.
Which is realistic.
It is.
It is, yeah.
My daughter was learning disabled, and I remember she had a high score on her reading and writing and verbal, but her math was pathetic. So she had that 30-point differential that identifies you as learning disabled. It took her a while to learn how to read because our schools are set up where you learn to read by writing. Well, she didn't have good eye-hand coordination. So she went to a special school in Atlanta called the Howard School, and she was reading in 2 weeks because they used audio phones to help them learn to read, as opposed to, as the school was requiring her to just on her own initiative go to the board and start writing. She was organizing plays. She was organized plays rather than go to the board. So as a result of that, they gave me a book to read, and it was called No Easy Answers. And I think that's really true with learning disabled. It's really true with mental illness. It's not tied up. You don't know how it's going to come out. And usually the answers you think are the answers are not the answers. You have to wait a long time to see what the answer is.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other questions? What were your thoughts?
No question. No question, but I thought it was beautifully written. It made me want to go travel up there and take a look, see myself. And I do appreciate the work that went into the historic part of it.
Yeah.
And I can't say I love the character of Claire. I was kind of disappointed in her. Certainly not a today's modern woman.
No.
I would have, I would like to see her kick him to the curb, grovel, do whatever. But I didn't think he should be redeemed. So I'm glad it wasn't a finalized thing, but you know, that's just my take on it.
Well, one of my male friends said exactly the same thing. He said, I was done with him. I would not have called him back, you know.
I think I had
No,
the same,
no.
I'm sorry. I think I had the same feeling. I really love to read a book where I learn, and I learned so much about that part of the country and the prejudices and even the part about the scams. You know, I'm feeling, oh, I'm in little town Beaufort, nothing's going to happen to us here, you know. And it made me realize, you know, yeah, I have a little local bank that I use, and so it made me question that. But the biggest, you know, the whole thing with the Italian background and the country, that I was like, our other friends here, I was like, I don't know if I could forgive him for what he did. So it was kind of nice that it was open, that she needed to have time.
Yeah, he was a real turd, excuse my expression. He was not a nice guy. He was very rude and abusive, but I also wanted you to see that he was victimized by his own father too.
Yeah, but I think that goes to your writing, that we've had these strong feelings about him.
Mhm.
You know, you've created a character that we had very strong feelings about.
Yeah, want to knock him over the head. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'll have to see how this happened, that works out if I do a sequel. And people have asked me if I'm going to do a sequel. I said, it sounds like you meant to. And I said, well, I hope to, but one never knows, you know. I hope to.
Turn a light on in here.
Yeah.
So-
Are most of you from Beaufort, or who's from somewhere other than Beaufort area? Janet, where are you from?
Saratoga, New York, but I worked and actually rented a home for 15 years in Knoxville, Tennessee. One of my goals was to hike as many of the 2,000 waterfalls as possible, and I thought your descriptions were fabulous.
Oh, what a
And
great place to live.
I really enjoyed, I really enjoyed also your descriptions of the musicians. It just really brought it forward to me. I enjoyed your book immensely. I was in the middle of reading another book, stopped and read your book and hardly put it down the whole time.
Oh, great. I'm so glad to hear that. My sister was had a 16-year career as had a day job, but then they had gigs. They were on Mountain Stage in West Virginia, and they were in the Atlanta clubs a good bit, particularly the Freight Room near Agnes Scott. And we followed her. They were based in Athens, Georgia, and Michael Stipe liked them, had them sing at his sister's wedding. So they had this thing going. It was my sister Katie and Maggie. They were the original two, and then they got Greg Ernst, who was a banjo player, really good banjo, mandolin. And then Steve came and joined them, and he had a deep bass voice, and he played bass. And they did some amazing music. It was just great. And I loved following them wherever they went. Of course, we got in free or less than other people, and that was nice. But we also jammed a lot. My sister was playing music and jamming a great deal. And I just wanted to evoke that feel. It's imaginary, you know. I'm imagining a house with that beadboard inside, the ceilings, the walls, everything's that blue beadboard that was perennial in homes of maybe the 30s, the cabins before they had a lot of sheetrock and things like that. And also there was a person who, when my sister had stopped playing, she got married at 49 and married another musician, and they kind of went to Spartanburg, South Carolina, and they don't play anymore. So I had to find another, and Jennifer Daniels came to play at Clayton State University, where I was on the writing center staff. And I went to see her. It just so happened that the student activities people put them in the cafeteria in summer when they have a big youth university at Clayton State. That means all middle schoolers all around. Not a one of them was paying attention. Not a one of them. But there were me and the student activities guy, and we listened, and they were so fabulous. And you would have thought they were playing at Eddie's Attic, as they often did, not acting like, you know, this is not important. They played the whole gig. It was great. So I went to Eddie's Attic, saw her there, several other places, and she's from Rising Fawn. She's from real close to Rising Fawn. She lives at that time lived in a cabin on Lookout Mountain, so that was another appeal. She's totally different. She's electric. She's rock, but she's original music. All of her music is her own, or her husband. Jeff's. So she's who I kind of modeled her on, and she happens to now at home with twins that are now 10, 12 years old. She said, I got tired of reading the kids stuff. I want to write my own. And so she started writing novels. So she's got a novel coming out and an album this June, I think in June. So that was where that came from. So it really comes from the heart, because I experienced a lot of the hanging out with musicians, and I've heard all that, you know, that self-deprecating talk when somebody says they're going to do something, the others say, yeah, right. You know, they're so funny with each other. If you're familiar with, you know, how that repartee goes back and forth. So, and I did get to hear Charlie Acuff play Gray Eagle, which is one of the songs I mentioned. It's amazing to hear that, and I have it on CD, so I played a lot of that music. But when I was writing, I did a lot of work over the years on this book. I stopped out for I didn't intend it this way, but 6 years went away while I worked on a nonfiction book called Seed of South Sudan, a novel, a memoir of a lost boy refugee. I met one of the lost boys through a woman at church, and she wanted me to help him take his 100 pages and turn it into a book. And his pages really needed a lot of work. We had to identify places that he was writing about. There were no maps. The southern part of South Sudan was not on any maps. So we had to create these maps, and our map maker turned out to want to come along with us as we created a nonprofit. He's now our treasurer, and he did graphic arts for 11 Alive. And we started this nonprofit to build water wells back in Majak's home country. So all of that left me off the track. But before I went into Seed of South Sudan, before I met Majak, one of the people in my writing class at the Callenwald Art Center in Atlanta, he says, I was writing parts of Rising Fawn. He says, where's the music? You need some music. And I realized in Abbeville, I didn't have any music. And so there's more of it in this. And that gave me the inspiration. And that is a large part of the life in the mountains. Mm-hmm. Janet, if you were in Knoxville, you probably listened to that crazy radio station that exists in a trailer where it's just all the best country music in the world. It's the most that kind of radio station ever. But it's music. It's a lot of what goes on there.
Great culture there. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. For 15 years, I worked out of Knoxville. I had two homes, one in upstate New York and one in Knoxville. So
what were you doing having two homes? Were you working?
I was setting up public charter schools across the U.S.
Oh, okay. Great.
After I retired as a school administrator.
Wow. Well, upstate New York has excellent schools, so that would
yes.
be that would make sense. Yeah.
Yep. It was good. It was good times. I really enjoyed it. In fact, I was debating, I was gonna move, I was gonna buy in Tennessee, and then I came to visit Beaufort, and it was so friendly.
Oh.
And that was how I ended up in Beaufort, was visiting and how friendly it was. But I was originally thinking I would retire to Tennessee.
Oh, wow. That's neat.
Mm-hmm.
Don't we live at a great time that we can visit places we want to be? I can visit this place in my mind. That is what is amazing to me. I've been living here for 5 years now, almost 5.
Yeah, and I spent 2 years in Atlanta, setting up public charter schools in Atlanta also.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Wow. Cool. Well, there were some excellent charter schools around us. We lived in Avondale Estates, and one of the charter schools was the museum school that was set up on a curriculum of helping kids learn through museums in the Atlanta area and and other places. Okay, so anybody else from those of you who have been here and are in Beaufort, have you lived in the mountains? Did you have any experience of mountains? I find people in Beaufort are from all over, so it's hard to characterize this as being from one place.
I lived in the
Here,
mountains, the Adirondack Mountains in New York State, and Janet and I have often talked about this. You know, our love for Lake Placid in the mountains are different. They're beautiful, wonderful. I've hiked many of them.
Yeah.
So I get it. I get what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
And Mary, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was going to say I came from, am I alive? I came from Colorado before I moved here, so I don't really consider the mountains out here mountains. You know, you don't have 14ers.
The hills.
Yeah.
They're kind of, yeah, they're like my foothills.
Right.
that I'm familiar with,
Well,
but
they're much older.
but I still want to go visit.
They're millions of years older, that and you know, eventually the ones in Colorado will look something like this perhaps, but
Yes,
yeah,
probably.
they're just a lot older.
Yeah, yeah.
I will
We
say
all sad with time.
I didn't understand a whole lot about
Oh.
how mountains were formed until I had to write about them. To me, they were just mountains or hills or cliffs or whatever, and they were pretty. The vistas are pretty. But you know, I didn't understand about. Well, I heard about tectonic plates, you know, but you know, putting this all together, apparently, this particular area or a lot of the Blue Ridge is multiple forces, including earthquakes, ice age action, sediment, and especially the ice age, the coast where the mountains are. You can go into Lookout Mountain and you will find pieces of shell in the rock because it was all an ocean, even that far up. And I'm guessing you would find the same thing in the Rockies too. I'm not sure.
You too, yeah, yeah.
But the action that created those mountains was at a specific time, and you know, there was a lot of ocean covering what we would see now in Lookout and Signal and all those mountains around. What was interesting to me, I have a three-dimensional map of all of the area because I could not recall this on my own. I had to have a lot of help. And the Tennessee Valley Authority has these large 24 by 20 maps of the various sections that their area encompasses, including North Georgia. So you can actually, and it's three-dimensional plastic, so you can actually see the ruggedness of the terrain. And I could describe what was happening, but I was also looking at these maps as I was describing it, so I could effectively describe it. I don't want to write a book where somebody on the mountain says that doesn't exist at all. That is just not there, you know? Or you've got it wrong. It's 3,000 feet, not 2,000. So I was pretty careful to research all that. But it is kind of amazing how it is also wrinkled in there. And, you know, there are these rivers that run through it and then create other chasms and stuff, breaks in the mountains. So that part was fascinating to me. And you can imagine the barriers that created. Like one of the characters has to take a train. He's from the South Pittsburgh area, which is east of Chattanooga. It's actually right near the Alabama border on the west side of Chattanooga, in Chattanooga area, not Chattanooga. And he has to, that's South Pittsburgh, Tennessee, named for Pittsburgh because they wanted to build the iron industry up. And it's still the place where your lodge ironware is still made. You know, all of the iron skillets and things like that, they're made there. I'm sure they have a lot of stuff coming from China, but that's where they're headquartered. All of that is a whole other area for him to get from South Pittsburgh just across the rivers and then some mountains to Trenton. He has to take a train from South Pittsburgh to Chattanooga and then get a train from Chattanooga down to Trenton. And then he moves by train from Trenton to Rising Fawn. He goes back and forth, and because that's the only transportation he has, and that's, you know, that's the age that he was. But, you know, to conceive of that, you know, that your movements are really over a lot of different territory in that area. I wanted to portray how could he have two families? Well, he was just real careful. You know, he wouldn't let his daughter go out, and, you know, wouldn't let her come to Rising Fawn because she might be seen, or vice versa. So
Yeah. It's pretty funny.
was there somebody like that? Not that I know of, but I did portray that there are people who knew each other as Catholics because they would meet near South Pittsburgh where there was a mission. And that was from family history. My ancestors were Irish stonemason. It was an Irish stonemason who built railroad bridges in the Tennessee Valley in the 1850s, I think. They said that he worked, speaking of upstate New York, that he worked on the last part of the Erie Canal. And then he came from Ireland, he worked there, and then he came south to build railroad bridges and settled near South Pittsburgh. And his cabin was where in the early 1900s, the Paulist fathers out of New York were big into evangelizing areas of the country that were not Catholic. And they came and they stayed at, there was a large home, actually a German, made in the fashion of a German castle, had been a Southern mansion. They turned it into a German castle in Winchester, Tennessee. And from Winchester, which is between Chattanooga and Nashville, they would, by horse and buggy, they would travel to what they called the old Irish coal camps around South Pittsburgh, up Sand Mountain, in further up the Cumberland Mountains in Tennessee, the Tracy City, Whitwell, Tennessee, small towns. But that's where they were going to evangelize. There were so few Catholics that in Shelby County, near Shelbyville, they said that they allowed only 3 Catholics to live there in that county. So there was not only a few in number, there was also kind of a, well, we don't really want them to be here sort of thing. But that was because they had lost all contact with the church. There weren't any priests or anything like that. But then they started evangelizing, and where my ancestors' cabin was, that's where they celebrated Mass in the area. So that's where they came together at the Ford home. And eventually they created a mission in South Pittsburgh, and there is a full-fledged church there now. But that's where, that's how, that was the beginnings of the Irish Catholics in that area, or at least reviving the religion that they left in Ireland or wherever. Any of you are any of you writing fiction, writing novels?
That would be
Wanting to?
Too hard.
Too hard. It's a lot easier to read it. I will say that I really enjoyed reading Pat's books. Pat Conroy's books are always favorites of mine. Cassandra, I've really loved reading her stories. They're just so full of these characters that are just priceless. I had been a reporter for UPI, so I knew how to write fiction, nonfiction. Long time ago, had a goal of being a writer, but you know, you get busy with life and that never happened. I did write for UPI and then went on to jobs where, you know, more like public information jobs. Eventually got a master's in psychology with emphasis on organization development. I began doing management training. There you're telling stories, but they're corporate stories, or they're stories about people in their lives from a motivational standpoint. I was mostly doing career development training or leadership training and communications, coaching and counseling. But I started doing career counseling to myself at some point and saying, remember, you wanted to be a writer. And I had some time on my hands in the health situation that caused me to have to stop and look and just be quiet and, wait out whatever was going on with me for a long time. And my husband and I had property on the Georgia coast. And I just started observing. And like I do now, I do a lot of observing of nature now, but I really learned how to do it down there because it was nothing, there was nothing around. And that helped me get into a mind frame of writing. When you stop your life down, you really have to do that. If you want to become a writer, you have to start to describe things. I started describing things, what I would see, the animals I would see, the river otters playing, the alligators and their lives, what they did. Lots of action, when you stop and look. And ironically, those are the kinds of descriptions I used to skip over when I was reading fiction. Say, oh, that's boring, keep going. But that's what makes a story, is the background, the circumstances, the reflections. Claire has some times when she's definitely going back and forth. And some of that interior feeling that I'm trying to express, I find different ways of doing that. Like she could be doing it to herself, but that'd be very boring. So Helene's there, and Helene really offers a contrast to her because she's much more pragmatic. And she's the first one that says, is there any bipolar in your family? She's very practical, and she's not as given as and she can be the one that says, why are you going so fast? Why don't you call another lawyer or something? She's very practical. And so that gives me a chance to show what's going on with Claire, and that she's just like, well, no, I gotta go. I got this job opportunity, I can go. And she's going up there and doesn't have a job. It sounded like the lady was very interested in her, didn't have any other applicants. So she's just wishful thinking she's gonna keep going. So showing that sort of thing with characters is what I became very interested in. Some of the people I took classes with were Richard Bausch, who is an excellent fiction writer. And from him, I really learned how to write dialogue, but don't hit people over the head with it. It's just very slight. I try not to have the he said, she said, all that so much as, you just get a sense of repartee back and forth. Get a sense of what's going on with them just from the words they use and how they use them and what they don't say. Who are some of your favorite writers? Who do you like? Or
Conroy.
television programs? You like Pat Conroy?
Oh, of course.
Pat Conroy for sure. But
Okay, Mary,
so
you're in Colorado. How did you get interested in?
No. I came from Colorado. I'm in Beaufort. I've been here for 6 years.
Oh, cool.
Retired. So yeah.
Wonderful.
So, and I love it.
I got to show you my
Colorado
shirt.
was great, but no
My
ocean.
happy place.
Can you see it?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
I can.
I'm extra. Yeah, I have to put it on because I'm another New Yorker, Western New York. And I'm sitting, there's about 4 feet of snow outside my window right now.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
So I put my Beaufort shirt on, and I just want to reiterate how it is nice to be able to have contact with this book club. So I hope it can, we go back and forth to Beaufort and Hilton Head, probably 5 or 6 times a year. We have a place, but sometimes I know I am so lucky. I wish I was there now though. So this is a really good situation. One of the good things that's come from the pandemic is to be able to be in touch. So I hope that I can continue to do that and, big part. So, and meet such great authors too.
And where in Western New York do you live?
We're just outside of Rochester, New York.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
So they
here's
call it the finger, yeah, and actually not far from the Erie Canal, as a matter of fact. And they call it the Finger Lakes region. So
Oh, that's neat.
pretty lakes nearby.
That's-
Lots of snow. It's about 14 degrees right now.
Oh, wow.
You
My
know.
brother lives in Allegheny.
Okay. Not far, maybe 3 hours.
Yes.
from here.
I haven't been to Rochester, but we did a book tour in New York State. We had a Poets and Writers grant from the Oswego Library. And we went up there to do a reading for Seed of South Sudan, Majok and I, and there were Lost Boys there who were going to Oswego State. Then we went to Syracuse and there were Lost Boys there. And we went to Lakewood, Ohio, near Cleveland. There were Lost Boys there. Every time we set up these places based on, would a church host us or the library or whatever. And our final stop was at St. Albans Parish, out right next to the National Cathedral in Washington. And there were people there who were very interested in refugee issues, particularly South Sudan. And so we had a lot of experience of going through New York. It is beautiful. My brother, as I said, lives in Olean, in Allegheny, near Olean. And my first view of it was, this is Tennessee. This is just like Tennessee.
Okay.
And I can understand why it was very home-like to him to move there.
Yeah, it is pretty there. Yeah. 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 There are some very nice parts of New York. It's just a little
And
too
motorcycle places. We had something wrong with our tire. We needed a tire or something in Jamestown. Jamestown had 3 or 4. It's a small town, but it had 3 or 4 major motorcycle businesses. You had Harley Davidson, you had Kawasaki, you had Honda.
That's
They're all
funny.
there because New York has such wonderful roads. Even though they get a lot of ice and snow throughout the state, there's a lot of motorcycling on those roads. It's really wide open.
Yeah, you're right. That's funny.
I'm not going to try to make you too jealous, okay? But today in Beaufort was probably one of the prettiest days. The sky was blue, the sun was shining, it was 62 degrees. I had fried shrimp sitting in the restaurant on the river, the mile marker. Came home and had a nice long bike ride with just a windbreaker over my sweater.
Okay,
And
stop.
You can have all that snow you want. I'm staying in Beaufort.
That's enough. Stop, don't do that.
Don't do that.
And Colleen, I didn't get to notice that because I was getting ready for today's meeting, but I really, it has very changeable weather.
I think we've been very fortunate with all the country freezing.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, I know.
there is a good part of it. And one of our writers here in Beaufort, Rebecca Bruff, is from Texas in Richardson. She was on, I guess, a program apologizing kind of for it yesterday, that she was having such a good time and they were having such a rough time. But she said, Texas has some weird Februaries anyway. The weather can get kind of weird. And we have our difficult times here sometimes. We just have hurricanes that chase us out occasionally.
Right. There's always something, huh?
Yeah, everybody's got something to do.
We do.
I think Atlanta was one of the few places that did not have a lot going on in that capacity. There would be tornadoes occasionally. The hurricanes did affect them one year, just in terms of rain and damage and wind damage. But when Katrina was happening and a lot of places, tornadoes have happened in large parts of the country, it seems like a lot of people came to Atlanta because that was one of the places that didn't get affected that much. But, there's probably, everybody's got one kind of thing to do. One across the bear in Atlanta is just too many people have come. I mean, it's very, very hard now to get around, but I still do miss the softness of the hills. It's pretty flat down here. To see the hills rise in the distance is always a great pleasure to me because it's something different. There's going to be a view from that hill. It's going to be a view from that mountain.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What, if anything, was edited out of your book? Or did you find it hard if things were edited?
Oh, to let go of it? I had a really good copy editor who looked at the book. This is Beaufort. I was selling my novel, Abbeville Farewell, at a little booth outside the Macintosh Books, downtown Beaufort. And some people, I started talking to a couple, and they were interested in the book. And it turned out that she has a Master of Fine Arts from Chatham University, I think it is, in Pittsburgh. And she said she did copy editing. And, we started talking. I said, well, I might like you to look at my book. Well, it turned out that we ended up working together. She's in Beaufort 2 months a year, and then she's in Pittsburgh the rest of the time. And so she looked at the book and she read it all the way through. And when, like me, you've been working on this book for so long, different people have looked at it at different times in separate workshops. Like I did a workshop with C. Michael Curtis, who's the head of fiction writing, or he's the fiction editor for The Atlantic. And I was in a workshop with him. I was in a workshop different times with Rosemary Danielle, and also, as I mentioned, with Carol Lee Lorenzo at Callenwald, and then, various people over time. So you don't have a unified look at it, but she looked at it and she just really wanted me to take some of the stomach reactions I had. I had every other page, she was having something go on with her stomach. So I deleted all of those. But that had come from my trying to be close to my character. And Carol Lee Lorenzo was probably the most helpful to me in helping me have characters show reactions physically or in some way. Something goes on in these little glimpses of that character. For instance, when Claire is so upset with her husband, she turns the Rodin statue so she can't see it in the mirror. That was just a sign of, she's angry, and that intimacy is gone. That's one of the things that she wouldn't want to do right now, wouldn't think of it. So showing your character through that kind of description is what I learned from Carol Lee. But I think I overdid a little. I think Lori let me see that I overdid it a lot. So I went through and I cut and I cut and I cut, and then she read again, and she was more okay with that. That was a risk to take. She was not anybody I'd ever been in a class with, and I wasn't sure her version of fiction was the same as mine, but we turned out to have a lot in common. And she actually helped me with certain passages and certain kinds of things that I was not aware of. I think she asked for more information in certain areas. She started out as a copy editor, but she really did more than that. So I have to give her credit. And I, hope we'll be able to work together again. So that's the main thing. Some people got a little tired of the drive over all those mountains. I kept it in. I just felt like that was part of it. There's this time when she stops and she checks a map and she pops her gum. That's on a road called Hogjowl Road. There really is a Hogjowl Road. It's a very long road. Bicyclists love it because it just goes, it's even, and it goes so far into the mountains, and there's a Pigeon Mountain on one side and Lookout Mountain on the other. And it's just very picturesque. You won't find many places like that. Well, my cousin has a dairy farm there. That's one of the reasons I learned it in there too. But it also helps you grow into the mountain. I wanted to show Claire growing in awareness of the mountain and it growing on her so that she can make this transition, this change. I think I don't know, what did you all think as far as what's going to happen with Claire? Could you get an idea? What do you have any thoughts?
I was kind of hoping that she stays up in the mountain.
Yeah.
Well,
She's
she
got
did say that
family,
she does
she
love
loves
you.
it.
That would be a good solution to that problem with Willie, right?
Right.
I didn't want to say it in so many words, but I wanted it to be clear that she's now a woman of property. She has a little bit more in this game. Whereas before it was all kind of his and what was going on with him and his family. Now she's got her own family.
Yeah.
It's
He was,
it's not
yeah.
the same, but it's a family.
He kind of was whining a lot at the end, you know, like he didn't feel comfortable. And so it kind of showed a shift that he isn't in control anymore. And she might be.
Yeah.
I was glad about that.
They're going to have to work some things out.
Yeah.
And who knows what's going to happen with her father, Dan. I don't think he's ever going to be different, you know.
No.
Her father-in-law is.
But also how typical of women of her mother's era not to talk about their backgrounds. And for her, you know, I mean, I just thought that I saw it with my own family where my mother didn't share a lot of things. And you find out later. So I found that was really true to character of that, you know, that generation.
Right. And it turned out her mother had a lot of reason not to talk.
Right.
She wasn't her daughter. That wasn't her mother. Her mother was her sister.
Right.
And what a betrayal that was. You know, that just was really awful. And yet I was hoping to get the idea across of, we don't know. We may think we know who we come from, but we really don't sometimes. Have any of you had, or you've probably been reading about people who have been getting their DNA test, finding out parent not expected, PNE. That's what they put on those forms for, what is it, 23andMe? When they do the DNA tests, people have ended up with, that's not the parent you had expected, but here's your parent.
Yeah.
That has happened to more people than I know. Well, 2 people in particular, and the stories have just been very different, very unusual.
Right.
Estelle, do you think that there'll be a sequel or a spinoff?
I'm hoping there will be. As a writer, what I find is I write what I want to know. I write what I know, but I also, more than that, I write what I want to know. I just am reading Ken Follett's The Pillars of the Earth.
Oh, it's a great.
Yeah, it's a big book.
Lovely.
Anybody else read that?
Yeah.
Long time
Oh,
ago,
yeah.
I did it.
Long
I'm
time
reading-
ago.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm reading his new one right now.
Is it, there's one that's a prequel to Pillars of the Earth or a sequel. I forgot which
Right.
one.
That's the one I'm reading.
What is it called?
I have to go get it. I forget.
He said at the beginning of
Something
it,
like day and morning, day and night. Yeah, day and morning or something. I don't know.
yeah. He says in the beginning of Pillars of the Earth that he wanted to know these things. You know, so he was going to have to write a novel about it. You know, so.
Which
And
is
it-
about 2 inches thick.
It's a way to find out what you want to know. What I want to know out of Pillars of the Earth, a friend of mine said, "Oh, you need to read this book." He said it's about the stonemasons. I do want to do some more research about the stonemason. Did he go? Was he there on the Erie Canal? I don't know. It could have been my father dreaming it or something. I don't know. It would have had to be the expansion or the redo or the widening of the Erie Canal, because he was too young to be part of the original Erie Canal. But he supposedly he was a supervisor at the end of it near Lockport. So I want to go find out, you know, was that true? But also I'll probably go to Ireland because that's where he was from. And
Yeah.
I've understood that stonemasons were like engineers. They didn't just lay stone. They requisitioned the stone, they managed that, they designed the projects, and they pulled it all together and supervised the people who were doing the work. So I'm you know, I'm like Ken Follett. I'll have to write a novel to know more about it. But that's part of what might be in there. But I've got to get back to Claire and Willie too. Helene might have a bigger role.
I would like you to come back for your next book and talk
Okay.
again.
It'll be a while. It'll be a while. I have to tell you that. I write slow.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being here
You're
tonight and answering all our questions and discussing the book. It was great. And thank you on behalf of all of us.
Well, thank you.
Thank
I have one
you.
last thing to show
Thank
you. I have one last thing to show you. I had another tiara done.
Yes, I love that.
This one is a true woodlands. It's a crown. And my
beautiful.
stepdaughter loves to work with greenery. This is a little weird. But anyway, this is yellow jasmine, not yet blooming in our area. It should be, but it's not, probably because of the rain. But
Yeah.
when I showed her this, she says, "Oh, I want that. Bring it over here." So she's been working on it.
Oh,
But
very nice.
in true
Perfect.
Pulpwood
Yes.
style.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody,
That's
for
Thank
coming
you.
tonight. And we'll see you next month.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Jonathan. Estelle,
Thank you,
thank you so
Jonathan.
much.
Oh, thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.